So, welcome everyone. My name is Jacqueline Mack. I'm the creative strategist and creative director of Mississauga Arts Council. And this side is Susan Dernan. She is the administration lead of the Mississauga Arts Council. We would like to thank you for attending tonight's TD Cultural Lab webinar, Movie Making on a Budget with Cynthia Crowfoot and Jim Morrison 4, presented by Mississauga Arts Council. TD Cultural Lab is generously sponsored by TD Bank Group.
The Mississauga Arts Council is dedicated to enabling the growth of the arts by creating opportunity and connection between artists and residents in Mississauga and beyond. Celebrating our milestone 40th anniversary this year, the Mississauga Arts Council is a registered charity dedicated to accelerating progress toward the attainment of our vision of Mississauga as a vibrant cultural community where arts and culture thrive. Our mission is to empower the arts economy by creating more opportunities and capacity, connecting artists to audiences and each other, and celebrating artists' achievements. We would also like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe Chippewa, and Métis.
A couple of quick reminders. Please turn your video off. Please keep your microphone muted. If you wish to make a comment or if you have a question, please use the comments section. We will be moderating the question and answer portions of tonight's webinar and ask that you use the chat feature to ask your questions throughout the presentation. We'll try our best to get through all the questions. If you wish to change the view you are seeing, there is a button on the top right-hand corner with the viewing options.
All right, let's get started. We're thrilled to present tonight's webinar, Movie Making on a Budget, with Cynthia Crowfoot and Jim Morrison 4. It's our pleasure to introduce the presenters. Cynthia Crowfoot is an award-winning produced screenplay writer and multi-award-winning actor. As a writer, her screenplays and produced films have won awards in New York, Los Angeles, and Toronto. As an actor, she has been working steadily in film, television, and theater for more than 25 years, with lead and principal roles in over 60 productions, and has garnered 8 Best Actress and 4 Acting Excellence Awards. Made in the USA, but born in Toronto, she has dual Canadian and American citizenship with Cherokee, Irish, English, and Czechoslovakian ancestry. Cynthia is a member of ACTRA and is SAG eligible.
Cynthia is joined by the talented Jim Morrison 4. Born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, he is now an LA-based international award-winning director. He began telling stories through a lens at age 13 as a photographer while living in Southeast Asia. By 23, Jim became one of the most sought-after music video directors in Canada and was a founding partner of Maverick Films, a Toronto-based commercial and music video production house. Jim transitioned into film and television and has directed and produced commercials, documentaries, and over 200 episodes of television in over 50 countries. Jim has been nominated 7 times with 3 wins at the prestigious Canadian Screen Awards, making him one of the most decorated directors in Canada. So take it away, Cynthia and Jim.
Yay. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is really great, and I'm super excited to share what little knowledge I have and what abundance of knowledge my partner Jim has with you about micro-budget movie making. Just a couple things to note. This is a really high-level overview of the process of making a low-budget movie, and any slide within this presentation could have been a presentation in and of itself. So know that we're giving you a very high-level overarching presentation of the entire process of making a movie. We have, at the end of the presentation, provided a link to a resources page, which will also allow you to link to our personal websites. And we're open and welcome to any questions that you have after this, or comments, or, you know, if a month down the road you think about something that you want to ask, just reach out. It doesn't end at the end of this. So who we are. So Jim and I met. What year was that, Jim?
Yeah, we were just talking about this earlier today. It's kind of interesting to be doing this particular presentation because we actually met on a micro budget feature that Cynthia was a lead in, and I was actually operating as a cinematographer on. And that had to have been in 2005.
I was 12. So
Exactly. I was an 11-year-old filmmaker.
yeah, we've known each other a long time. We've stayed in touch. Jim moved all the way out to the West Coast to California, and he continued to stay in touch with me. So I must be doing something right. All right, I have another blip here. There we go. So the first slide we have here is what exactly is a micro budget. And a micro budget, it's literally anything from $0 in your iPhone to $250,000. And there's different definitions. The US usually targets it at about 25,000. In Canada, we use the telefilm talent to watch budget limit, which is $250,000. $150,000. But really, it's whatever money you have to spend on a film to make yourself. And the big key is to not go into debt.
Yeah, so down in the States, there's not as much as a government investment culture. There's a little bit more of a hustle and grind culture. So when I hear people talking about making nano budget, micro budget, low budget kind of floats a little higher because in LA, $2 million is a starter film. But usually I expect people to be talking around $25,000 to $30,000. And there's lots of great examples of films that have been successfully made in that kind of budget range. But there's also a number that have been made in much smaller budget range as well. So your budget doesn't have to limit you from making your film. And I guess the main thing that just kind of echo what Cynthia said is don't put it all on your credit card and think you're going to pay it off. It's like you hear success stories from that, but there's, it's like 99% failure rate for people that do that and just go into debt. So if there's one takeaway from today, I'm going to put it right up front is don't go into debt for this.
Yes, I echo that.
So micro budget filmmaking is not a new thing. It's more accessible now than it ever was. And I just wanted to touch on kind of three big movements of micro and low budget filmmaking that are worth going down the rabbit hole of. We're not going to get into the history of it at all. I happen to be a history nerd, but I think for the purposes of this presentation, it's better if you just spend your own time going down. One of the best, in my opinion, is the French New Wave that started in the 50s. And that was when filmmakers wanted to just reject traditional filmmaking, stay out of the studios and make their own thing. Sometimes it's because they couldn't afford to make, or they couldn't get into the studios, so they had to do it by any means necessary. There's a lot of really great films that came out of that movement, a lot of great filmmakers that came out of that movement. That to me was kind of like the golden era where you're still looking at cinema. Two of the later ones, Dogma 95 was in the 90s. They had a manifesto. It was, really driven on story, acting, theme, and excluding, special effects, big lighting setups. You'd have literally people with mini DV cameras stealing locations and shooting things. And that movement was started by Gus Van Sant, who, if you look up, is one of the great directors of this generation. And then finally, the last one I think is worth going down the rabbit hole of is the Mumblecore movement, which is a little bit more contemporary. It's similar with less rules than the Dogma 95, and it's low budget film production, emphasis on dialogue over plot. I'm personally not a huge fan of what the end result is of either of these two movements, but I do think that there's a lot to be gained from studying them.
Yeah, and I guess the takeaway is that micro budget filmmaking isn't a new thing that we've already come up with. It's just something that's easier to do now in this day and age, and that is it is growing astronomically. So the next big thing for us was to know your why, and I guess a lot of people are wondering, well, you know, I want to make a film. That's why I want to do it, but it's deeper than that, and it do you want to do a film because you want to grow your career? Is this the career path that you want to go down? Is it a story that you've been thinking about and been burning and itching and dying to tell? This story that you just have to get out there for the public to see. You want to go to Hollywood? You want to be rich and famous? It's a why. It's a very elusive why. For money, I had a friend early in my career who wanted to get into films to be rich. That's the only reason he wanted to do it. And he got out of the industry 5 years later because it just wasn't a doable why. Networking is one of the best reasons to get into making a film, because you forge connections, you build relationships, and you're able to utilize those relationships throughout your career. So when you go and you do your next film, you have this little pocket of people with experiences and talents that you can pull on. Learn by doing, right? Do you want to make a film because you've never done it and you want to learn how to do it? Or maybe you want to learn different aspects of filmmaking. You've always been a PA and you want to learn how to, you know, do something else. You want to shadow a director. Those are really great reasons why you want to make a film.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, we have purpose, vision, and execution. With every project that I take on, I kind of divide my career into two boxes. I've got a service box, and that's all the projects that I do that keep our lights on. And I happen to really enjoy my service box. That's commercials. It used to be music videos, although music videos were also educational for me. And that's why I do some lifestyle television as well. But then you also have to remember why you got into the business, and that's my legacy box. So every day I try and put more projects into my legacy box. So what I really get moved by in filmmaking is telling stories of unsung heroes in history you don't know about, but you probably should. And if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't work in the business, because frankly it's not easy. There's easier ways to make a living. So I think if you can identify why you want to do it, then it makes all the hard times worthwhile. And actually it makes the hard times really rewarding at the end of the day. So I have my purpose. So why does this thing exist? And then what does that thing look like is my vision. And then I got to set up my execution. How am I gonna do it? And always with my execution, I try to figure out, like, what are the successes inside the execution? But also, if I fail, how can I still succeed? So what have I learned that's new? Have I made a little extra money, or hopefully not, or learn not to lose money next time? So that's why I think identifying your why is really important, because it'll get you through the grind.
And it can be as simple as, for me, I was turning 50. This was almost 4 years ago now. And, you know, my first love, my first passion has always been acting. And the roles that I was getting weren't the type that I wanted, that I saw myself playing. Like, they were moms, and there's nothing wrong with playing a mom, but they weren't these passionate, big characters. And I mentioned casually to Jim one day, I said, you know, I really want to write my own movie. And God love him, he kept kind of poking me very softly and saying, have you written anything yet? Have you written anything yet? And then I did. And, you know, that helps for me. Jim has his two boxes. My box is my day job. So doing this it gets me through my day job, because I have this to look forward to, this passion that I can tap into. So find your why. It'll drive you.
So that said, we can kind of move on to some more practical things. But I really do think it's important to think about not just why do you want to be a filmmaker, but like, why do you want to do a specific project that you're looking at? But getting into the practical stuff, it's the how. And one of my favorite adages, and one of the things I learned very quickly when I started my career, was you can have two of these three things. You can have it good, fast, or cheap. If it's good and cheap, then it's not going to be fast, which is hopefully the lane that you guys are in. If it's good and fast, it won't be cheap. If it's fast and cheap, it won't be good. I think you guys can probably do the math on that one. But we're hoping to find in this presentation to help you figure out the places where you can save and spend time, which will save you money as well to elevate the project.
Yeah, basically the ones that you do for a micro budget are going to be less expensive, but not as quick. I find that a lot of the time, and really appreciate the people who are helping you, because they're doing it for less money, and maybe they won't be as fast because they're squeezing your project in between things. But appreciate them and just know that the end product will come. It happens as it happens. Okay, so what do you have access to and who do you know? This is a really important task to do. You want to take inventory of what you have and who you know, because these people are the people who are going to help you save money. So do you know a really great location? List all of the locations that you have that you know. Work with the writer if you're not the writer, so that they can incorporate the location, the props, the wardrobe, these things that you have access to that are free into the script, because that will save you a lot of time. Do you have access to equipment? What equipment do you have access to? Do you have access to lights, cameras? Acting talent. We all know actors. We all know a lot of actors. It's your project. It's your film. Find the actors who bring talent, not just your friend. I have a lot of actors. Not all of them are talented. Crew, bring them on. A good thing for this is to, can you give them a position bump? Maybe they want to try something new on your set. They have some experience in one role. They want to try something else. And then the bare minimum that you'll need for your project, so when you're thinking about who you know, what you're going to do, is you want sound for sure, camera, an organizer who's going to make sure that things run smoothly and all your paperwork and everything's done, a writer, the actors, and a director.
In some scenarios, you could do all of those things. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah. Well,
I shot a short film. I shot a short film in Los Angeles, kind of as an exercise, which is really under this model, and it was with two very accomplished actors in LA, and we had access to a really great prop and a great location, and the three of us came together and walked through the location and talked about themes that we would be interested in, and we took it on as a challenge to make a film within the parameters of this location under a tight time restriction, so it didn't kind of stretch out over a long period of time. And we set our expectations very low. If it was terrible, it never needed to go anywhere because there was no investment made other than time and energy. If it was pretty good, you could use it for your reel. You could use it in your social media. And if it was really good, we would put it into festivals. And so the parameters were 2 weeks. We looked at the location. The three of us looked at the location that we had access to whenever we wanted. It happened to be my underground parkade, and there was a really nice 67 Skylark down there that we were going to write the whole story around. We spent a week writing. And then we did a blocking rehearsal without any gear. And then the following weekend, with the help of one kind of PA, in the span of 3 hours, shot what turned out to be a really good little short film. I think the whole budget for it, I happen to own a decent amount of gear, and I also happen to know how to use it. The location was lit from practicals, meaning that we didn't have to bring in any extra lighting. I think the whole budget was about $40 because there was 2 props that were rented. So all that to say, when you kind of list your assets and kind of work inside a box, then that's a really good approach.
It's really important to take an inventory so that you know what your budget's going to be, right? Really sit down. The preparation up front is going to be really helpful to you later on. So figure out what you have, what you need, and then, how much money you have to spend to get what you need. This will help you as you move into development.
And as far as like the previous slide goes with the good, fast, or cheap, I would say that it could have been, that short film was actually pretty good. It was very fast and it was very cheap. However, sound could have used improvement, and it hasn't gone out to any festivals because it's sitting in post because we all got other projects going on.
Yeah.
So I guess ultimately it wasn't fast.
Ultimately, it wasn't fast. It's still not done. You can talk to this one.
Sure. Yeah. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. When you think inside the box through development, those are all the assets that you have available to you. And I do this on big projects as well, but also when you get into production, you have to throw that away and be able to think outside the box because things are going to happen. Things are going to go wrong. So on another small film that short film that we did, actually the same team that we shot the first one with, the script was written for a giant warehouse. It was an interrogation scene, and it was so prohibitive to do it there. Hanging lights got expensive. The crew was very small. The budget was tiny, but we're in LA, so why not shoot in a desert? It still has that isolated feeling. You're in the middle of nowhere. It's actor centered. There's good production value for being out there. You probably won't get disturbed by anybody. Less sound to concern yourself with. So that was in production. We needed to think outside of the box. But I find on all of my projects there are times throughout the course of production that you have to accept what's coming into you, accept it as a gift, and find a new way to do what you're aiming to do, just in a different way.
Especially when you're on a budget, because can't get those.
Yeah, and so this is the time thing again. This is so you might have to sprint through production because production has the most moving parts. It's got a lot of people, it's got gears, it's got favors, you got to feed people, you got to travel people, you got to coordinate things. That might be the place where you have to be the most economical. Back when I was doing music videos, we would do 2 or 3 music videos over the weekends because we could get a 1-day rental on gear through pre-production, which means that we would really grind and sprint through production, but we could take a little bit more time in post and more planning with prep. And this also pertains to short and long format narrative projects. Spend your time in prep and spend your time in post because they are the least they have the least moving parts.
There you go.
Anything you want to add?
No, I'm good with what you said. So
I mean, Cynthia, you've been experiencing that, with your films as well. Like post, you were saying just the other day that post always seems to take a little longer than you expect it to.
Post takes longer than I ever expect it to, but it's because I'm beg, borrowing, and stealing from people for favors, and they do a great job, and I don't complain. And thinking outside of the box. I mean, the other thing you want to think about is, so we just finished filming my short film Compliant, and we needed a desk and a chair, and it was a pretty specific thing that I had written. Luckily, we found a location that worked for the story. and you know, you don't want to have to buy a brand new desk and a brand new chair, because that's really a big hit on your budget. So luckily I come from a theater background, and I was always trying to figure out how we could get what we needed for the plot at the cheapest price. So, you know, visit when it opens again after COVID, visit like Value Village and go on to Facebook Marketplace, which is where I found my chairs, and go on, you know, all of those websites where people are getting rid of things that they don't want anymore and that you can use. And so we were lucky enough to get some pretty cheap stuff, and then I just spray painted it out on my balcony. But yeah, you can definitely have to think outside of the box at times, especially when you're working towards a budget. If you have all the money in the world to spend, then, you know, you don't necessarily have to be as creative. But then you move into development, which is not really hell. And there's a lot here about story. So we were talking about how your script is key to a good micro budget film. Work with what you have when you're writing your script, or work with your writer and let them know what you have so that they can incorporate it into the script. There's no sense writing a script that has a car crash and explosions if you're working on a $5,000 budget. There's just no way that you'll be able to do it. So write the script, take your time, as Jim said, writing the script, rewrite it, think about it, and then take it with a group of people. If you have some of your crew there, bring them together for a read through. It doesn't have to be with the actors who are going to actually play the parts, but bring them through and listen to the script as the writer, so that you and your team can figure out what works, what doesn't work, what needs to be adjusted. Does that location work? You know, what is the feel of this script? What can we change? You know, like Jim said, if we don't want to use a warehouse, can we use the desert? That's the same kind of deserted, isolated feeling. So collaborate and then brainstorm and then rewrite your script with all of the input. Stay true to your story, right? Stay true to your vision. Keep that passion that you have, that story that you want to tell, but rewrite it in a manner so that your story actually gets made within the budget that you have, because all of that feeds into your budget.
So yeah, all that feeds into basically your first draft of your budget, so you can approximate it and kind of go, am I just out to lunch? Which you might be, and that's okay. Then you just earmark that script for, you know, to make it as your fifth movie, you know, after you've got your street cred. One of the things that's really important for the read-through stage, I help produce a lot of actor read-throughs for writers in Los Angeles with the Storytellers Conservatory. And one of the things that's really important is to go to that, have that read-through without an ego, and a great list of questions for people. What's working? Where did they get bored? Is the story moving? Does it make sense? Because you want to make sure, you know, your story is working first and foremost. And then your collaboration and your brainstorm, if you have your key crew there, meaning, you know, maybe your cinematographer and or your producer and or your AD, and that could be one person that's a multi-hyphenate, or two people that's a multi-hyphenate. They may have some ideas on how to solve big ticket problems. Like, you can't shoot a car crash, but you can infer a car crash. And you'd be amazed at what gets put on the table if you are gracious at your read through and you leave your ego at the door and you're willing to listen. There's Ron Howard, who's of course, you know, like one of the great directors. When he was shooting Cinderella Man in Toronto, I had a bunch of friends that were, it's an $80 million movie roughly. You know, shooting in Toronto, like he notoriously shoots with like 10 cameras at a time, but he would go around to each camera operator and say, this is my idea for the shot. Do you have anything better? And if they offered it up and it was the better idea, then he would take that. And that's empowering your creative collaborators to help put their juice into it as well. The reason why formatting your script is really important is because that's what every department uses to pace out your script. It's roughly a minute a page when you write. So if you have a 10-page script, that's a 10-minute film, if it's formatted correctly. That's how people, ADs, assistant directors, break up their days. And in the resource link, there's a bunch of recommended screenwriting software. You can, Final Draft is kind of the industry standard, but there are other options that are free or less expensive that you can also download. So those resources are in the resources link we'll give you guys.
Yeah, and also it doesn't hurt to buy at least a book or do some research online about the proper formatting of a script and how to write it, because it is really the first step towards making your film, and you don't want to skimp on the first step because it's the foundation upon which your entire movie will be built. And if it's shoddy, we all know what happens.
And the other way to improve your sense of storytelling and structure is to either borrow from the greats. There's a ton of public domain stuff out there, like Shakespeare is all public domain. It's like anything after 1920 or 1930 or whatever it is in the public domain. So you can borrow those structures. You could use the whole script if you wanted to, but you can borrow those structures to inform how you write your script, and try and get your hand on great scripts to read.
Yeah.
And a basic guideline for an ultra low budget, micro budget would be to try and keep your characters 1 to 3 characters. 1 to 3 locations is kind of a good pocket to look at. If you can do a whole film in 1 location, even better. Especially now that we're in COVID, but just in general on micro budgets, no background actors or very few of them. No firearms, because that just opens a can of worms. You don't want to get arrested. No explosions, and I also recommend for first-time directors as well as micro budgets, no kids and no animals, because it's a lot of that's a lot.
Well, and for the gun, so Jim says no guns. So both of my short films have had guns in them. The first one had an actual gun, and we had a gun wrangler on set. The other thing that you want to think about is, can you think outside of the box? Because although I had a real gun on my first one, and we had a gun wrangler and all of that stuff, on my second film,
a real prop gun.
It was a real. It was a real prop gun. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I borrowed it off a friend of mine. It could have been a real gun, but we won't go there. For the second film, we had, it was non-functioning though. Yeah, I'll clarify that. For the second film, we got Nerf guns, and we had a really great art department. They had never done art for a film before, and we asked if they would be interested in getting some experience, because that is the career path that they wanted to follow. So they were willing to come on board for free. And they made these Nerf guns look so amazing that, we didn't need to have a prop gun or a real gun. And then the other caveat I would say when you're thinking about filming is, when you're writing your script, don't put stunts into your script, because that can, it takes up more time, which is a currency. And then you have to have a stunt coordinator on set. You have to be practicing the stunt. You have to make sure everything goes well. So it's probably wise to not have that as well. And I would say
the caveat to that. Sorry, I totally jumped on you there, Cynthia. the caveat to that would be, unless you know a really amazing stunt team and your whole project is centered around that team, that is going to bring that A game for you, because that can elevate your project.
Yeah.
But in our case, it wasn't a stunt, or in your case for Obdurate, it wasn't a stunt oriented film.
No, it was actors action, but we still had to have a stunt coordinator. And for my one trip and fall, it took us 3 days of practicing. Anyway. So
and it was a team of 5 on the 4 or 5 on the day in the stunt team.
One fall, literally one fall. But I felt really safe. the next thing that we're going to talk about is, as my friend Jim says, most people say, take it away, fix it in post-production.
Yeah, so the other big film adage is fix it in post. I come from the school of fix it in pre. So if you can fix it in pre-production, then you're gonna be miles and miles ahead.
Yeah, so the things that you want to look at in pre-production include your crew. Who do you know? Who are you going to need? What is the bare minimum that you can get away with? Smaller is absolutely better in this instance. You don't want to have more people than you need. And we already went through the bare minimum of who you would need as sound director, actors. Your location, okay, what do you have access to? Where can you go? Ideally for free. The other thing you want to think about with location is it pre-dressed? Because if it's not, if it's a great looking location, but you don't have any tables or chairs or desks or any of the stuff that's going to dress it up, you're going to have to provide that. So you really want to make sure that, you know, you look really well for your location. And then make sure you visit your location a number of times before you film, so that, and with your crew, so that they can get a sense of the space, where the light's going to come from, you know, what the best time of day will be to shoot different scenes. The last film that we just did, Compliant, we started losing the light and we had to really rush through the last couple shots because it changed the continuity of the shot. Because we were losing the light, and we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't gone to the location a number of times first.
Another thing that people miss on their location scouts is listening for sounds. So it's very, very key to have your sound person there if you can. If you can't, then you want to be listening for traffic, ambient noise, generators that go on and off, fans, those sorts of things, because that can really change your day. The other thing about locations is you really want to manage whoever owns the location's expectations. Don't overpromise. You know, don't say, well, it's going to be quick, we're going to be in there just for an hour, if you're probably going to be in there for 12. Yes. And always make sure, this is a theme throughout my work, you know, just my working style is you have to look after your people. So that also comes into the location world, where you want to leave your location infinitely better than you found it. So clean, tidy, things put back, photographs are taken, floor plans are made, so that so you're not ruining it for the next team who wants to come in there.
Exactly. And then the next thing for pre-production is, we called it creative planning, but this, in this lovely little picture that you see here, this was my first shot at a storyboard. I did this for, it was a trailer for the feature film that I've written, and it's cute. All right, I look at it now and I laugh. I'm a little embarrassed by it, but it goes towards planning. At least I sat down and I took the time and I said, this is how I see this little 1 minute thing flowing, right? We're going to start here. We're going to go here. Plan out your shots, plan out your scenes. Make sure that you know what you need to shoot and how you're going to shoot it, because it really will help you on the day.
The day is extremely, can be extremely chaotic with a lot of moving parts. I personally don't use storyboards unless it's a commercial, but that's just because I can't draw. I would love to work. I would love to work off of storyboards. I do work off a shot list, but it's really just a suggestion list. But I've typically gone through it very meticulously with my cinematographer, particularly, and my assistant director, if I have a first AD on it. Because sometimes I'll need to combine shots or drop shots, and I need to figure out on the day how I'm going to solve having dropped the shots that I had planned on. And that happens. So that's where we're planning your scenes. I try and get my hard shots out of the way first, start my wides, and then come into my tighter shots. But the more complicated scenes I try and knock off at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, and that also lends towards when you're running short on time at the end of the day, where we were talking about think outside of the box. Like, just keep your mind open during that day. Plan your production equipment, what you have access to, what you can beg, borrow, steal. What do you need to get the day done? One of the most important things I'm going to say again is sound. So if you have to pay for anything, pay for sound equipment and a sound person to be there, because audiences will forgive poor shots, as Jim has told me. They don't forgive poor sound.
Yeah, and I would say that in the industry, a solid camera person, cinematographer or director of photography, is easier to find if they get excited to come out for free and bring some resources to it if they are excited about the concept and look of the project. A sound person is not. People typically don't go into location sound because they're excited about location sound. It's just, there's more exciting things in sound than recording sound on a set. So you will probably have to never underestimate the value of great sound. Listen to your sound guy. There was a guy that I used to work with that drove me crazy, where you would cut and you'd ask how it was for camera. They'd say that shot was good for me. And then you'd ask how it was for sound. And they would say, oh, bits and pieces. and although he was a very skilled location sound person, you never really knew what you got until you got into post. It's like, do we need to go again or do we not need to go again? So having a great sound person on set can be a real lifesaver. All the other departments are also important, but you can watch a poorly photographed film with great sound and still get a great story. But if Braveheart had terrible sound, you wouldn't watch it. I would watch that if it was shot with a Handycam.
Agreed. And then we move into casting. Casting is really important for a film, says the actor, because, and this is a quote up for debate. I never thought that anybody would disagree with me until Jim did. I heard, and I agree with, is that a good actor can elevate a poor script, but a good script cannot compensate for poor acting. And I will leave it to you to think about that, mull it over, and see if you agree or disagree. But when you're casting, I know you want to cast your friends, but as I said before, I know a lot of actors, a lot of them. Some of them are fabulous. Those are the people that I invite to my film because it's my money and I want the acting to be solid. And I have some friends that are good actors, but maybe they're just not right for this role. So it's your money, it's your film. Cast it appropriately.
People get into acting for one of a number of reasons. Some people just get into it because they want to be famous, which I think is a terrible reason. I've spent a lot of time with acting coaches in Los Angeles, and an actor who really knows their craft and can make choices will set your film apart. If you have to be a very skilled director to be able to shoot around bad performances. I have been in that situation, and I have
not with me.
Not actually. One of them was a production you were on, but it wasn't you.
Okay. Let's be clear here.
But sometimes actors just have a bad day as well. And this actor, was just having a bad day, and couldn't get their lines straight, and flubbing left, right, and center. So we had to shoot around the performance, and it was a corporate project, commercial project, and the client ended up loving that person. But that's not a situation you want to be in day over day over day on your great indie film.
And I guess to that point too, once you've cast your film, it's really good to go back and do another read through with the actual actors who are going to be playing the roles, so that they get to hear the entire movie. And then what I really liked about working with Jim is that he sat down with us in my first film, and in my second film with my other director, talked to us about the motivation and what was our backstory and how did we see the characters. And that really helped me to get a further grounded in a character that I had written, and you know, I was studying to act, but it really helped also for him to understand where we were coming from as actors. So that's really important too.
Yeah, trust I think is the biggest thing in that space.
I agree.
So cast for talent and taste.
And speaking of taste, here's food. And you laugh at food, but food is so important on a micro budget short. You really, if you have people who are coming to you and who are lending their talents and their time, possibly their equipment to your project, you really want to make sure that you're doing all you can to say to them, thank you. And one of the ways to do that is through their stomach. So you really want to feed them well.
I have a hard rule of no pizza. You should definitely respect dietary concerns and considerations. When I was first coming up, we were running Maverick Films. We did probably about 70 music videos over the span of a few years. We shot them on film. You know, Canadian music videos tend to not have the budgets. This is like the heyday of MTV and Much Music. This is like Napster was deteriorating the music industry. This is like early 2000s. So they were always strapped, but we always made sure that our crews were well fed, because you didn't want to be known as the brown paper lunch bag production, because everybody remembers the production if their crew based on the food they ate. It's not always 100% true, but I think that's a good way to look at it.
Right. And then all of this should give you a really better, solid understanding about your budget. So you want to go back to that original budget that you wrote and revise it line by line, saying, this is what I actually have. Maybe I need to shift some money around. Make sure that you're taking responsibility for your budget. So now we reach the day. We're here, we're filming. And
yeah, so I feel like I'm full of adages today. One of the other adages I like is if you're on time, you're late. Especially the bigger your crew, the truer that is. But it's really noticed when the crew is small. People do not like their time wasted. So be very respectful of people's time. Every production that I've been on, people arrive at least a few minutes early. It gives them a sense of the space, and then just nobody's waiting on you. Make sure that you, like I mentioned earlier, you do thorough walkthroughs of your location, so you know what that you're leaving it better than how you arrived.
And take pictures.
Totally take photographs. There have been stories about things going missing on set. I shot a pretty big, it doesn't fall into the micro budget category, but I shot a good sized short film in March of last year, just as the pandemic was breaking, and it was a period piece. And extras stole props. So things grow legs. So you want to make sure, especially when it's somebody else's place and you are using maybe their furniture or the things around their home, that everything goes back the way it was. It feels like that should go without saying, but you'd be surprised at how often it doesn't. And if you screw something up, own it. Yeah. Replace it, pay for it. So I can't get over the importance of looking after people when you're making particularly micro budget, but any kind of project.
I was on a short, I guess 2 years ago now, and they graciously, we were shooting at a historic home with a bunch of antiques, and the crew were very young, and they came in with coffees and waters, and they put, you know, their coffee, their water, everything on these antiques. Well, one of them spilt, it left this huge ring on this. It was a very expensive antique piece of furniture. The guy who lent the house was not happy. I mean, the person who was filming it had to pay for it, had to replace that. And it shouldn't have happened. It should have been, they should have been more respectful of the environment that they were in.
It's really good to have somebody on the day, your day in and out, if you have more than a couple of people, to dedicate one person to track your cash flow, because production is where you can really lose track of what things cost. It's an extra coffee run, it's an extra this, it's an extra that, you know, this didn't work out, somebody had to Uber. And on a micro budget, those small things really start to compound. So you need to have somebody that is tracking that every day. And you might have to eat whatever that cost is, but then you will know on your next couple of days ways that you may be able to gain back that loss. Get your paperwork organized. So that's deal memos with your cast and crew, releases for locations. You want to get that on the day so that you are not chasing it after you're done, and so that nobody can sabotage your film while you're in post or after it's finished. You want to have all that stuff above board and done. For some reason, people in the arts get nervous around or don't like to talk about contracts. I have zero objection to talking about contracts because they lay everything out. Contracts are for when things go bad. So get that paperwork done. Look for happy accidents. You know, sometimes, you know, that goes back to thinking outside the box. At some time, an actor performs in a way that you didn't expect, or drop something, you know, that they weren't supposed to drop. Just keep the camera going. Look for those moments that can bring some humanity to your project. Some of those things are a gift. Sometimes it's pouring rain and you're like, oh, it's pouring rain, but that's what's going to elevate your scene. Sometimes it's a disaster, but look for the ones that are happy accidents. The 4 L's for more cinematic. These are just ways to elevate these are like the 4 things that I think about in terms of trying to make sure that my project always has a cinematic feel to it. Number 1 is lighting. Lighting feels like it could be daunting, but you can get by on such minimalist lighting. If you look at a film like The Revenant, which is a huge Hollywood film, they didn't have any lighting in that film. They were mostly taking it away from the sun, meaning that they were putting up things to block it and diffuse it. So you don't need to have big lighting setups for it to look great. You can do an awful lot with a single light, or with no light if you know where to place your actors. There's a film that's noted in the resources, which was Christopher Nolan's, I think, first feature that he made for dollars. It's a black and white film that they either didn't have any lighting for or very minimalist, but he was always placing people close to windows. But they all felt natural there. I would take number 2 is lenses. I come from a photography background, so I kind of nerd out on that type of stuff. Cinematic lenses, I would take a single cinema lens over a big variety of lenses personally, to get a nice shallow depth of field and give a bit of a personality to the film. So if you have the blessing of having a cinematographer that knows things, talk to them about the character of lenses. That's that to me is a more important place to invest money in the camera department than what camera you shoot on is. Embrace your limits. That's again shooting inside the box, but also thinking outside it. And number 4, if you have access to a tremendous location, use it. Locations can elevate your production maybe more than anything else, other than a great actor's performance, Cynthia.
Thank you.
But locations are surprisingly hard to come by for inexpensive or free, especially in cities like Mississauga and Toronto and Etobicoke and even Hamilton to a degree now, that are affordable and haven't been shot to death. We are in a film. We are in film towns or cities when we're in those places. So if you have access to one, write it into your film.
Yeah, work with your writer, or if you are the writer, as I am, figure out what story you want to tell and what you have access to. Jim told me one day, he says, I have a garage, I have a forest. Write for that. I was like, okay.
And then going back to looking after people, especially if you're borrowing gear, but even if you're renting it, return your gear better than when you got it, because that will curry you favors in the future. I own a decent amount of gear, and I have a few people that I will lend my gear to because it comes back cleaner and better packed than when I sent it out. But if anything goes wrong with your gear, make sure you report it to whoever you rented or borrowed it from, so that they don't discover that later, because that stuff always comes back. And that's a way to establish yourself in the micro space, but being able to elevate, because people now trust you to the next level of filmmaking if you're able to kind of ladder up into bigger productions.
And we've talked about location. So it's 5 after 8. We're gonna kind of go quickly through the last few slides so that everybody has a chance to ask some questions. I know that we went through, but so after your film is completed, you've done it on the day, you enter into post-production. This is really important. You want to work with these people. You want to stay true to your vision, but you want to draw on their expertise, because these are very specific niche jobs, right? Editing, the score, and then post sound. And the score and post sound, we've already touched on how important sound is. That just takes your film to a different level, these two things. Editing is where you sit with someone and they put together the footage that you got during production to tell the story that you wanted to tell in the first place. So stay true to your vision with this, but always let them kind of show you things that maybe you didn't see it. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm in the middle of rewriting one of my scripts, and I've rewritten it about 5 times now. And I'm so close to every version that I've written. I don't have any critical distance now for the nuances of the story, and does it flow? So listen to the editor when they say, what about this or what about that? You can always say no. It doesn't hurt to listen.
But it's also critical, like anybody that you're going to work with on any kind of creative project, you want to hire them for their base level of competence, or they come to the meeting for the base level of competence, but really you're hiring for taste. So they need to have the skill, but they also need to understand the project. And editors are interesting because they will find things that you didn't know you had in your film. Mm-hmm. They will find a look or a moment or make something mean something that you had no idea was the intent in it. And it may be beautiful, it may be terrible, but when you are simpatico in taste, because they're really, after the writer and the director, they're really the third storyteller until mm-hmm. the studio producer comes in and destroys it all. But if you don't want to just have a button pusher, you want to have somebody that's going to take some creative ownership and be excited about putting their taste and skill into your project. Mm-hmm. Show up with a latte. That'll go or whatever their caffeine.
Or a bottle of wine. That's what I part of my payment for my last editor. He liked red wine, so I got him some really good red wine. At the end of the day, I'm going to just be very brief on this. If you're doing your film because it's yours and you're targeting putting it into festivals, I'm going to say, because I've learned the hard way, have a festival plan. It may seem like $40 for this one, $20 for this one. It adds up really quickly. And if you don't have a sort of targeted festival plan, either you're going to target niche festivals or specific festivals, you will end up spending a lot of money. So make sure you budget for this, make sure you stick to your budget and pick wisely, because TIFF, Cannes, Sundance, like Tribeca, all of these people want to get into them, and everybody thinks that their film is really great and it will get into them. Like, I love Obdurate. I think it's amazing. And I don't understand why it didn't get into not one of these films, not one of these festivals. So choose wisely.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just as a frame of reference, festivals like Sundance or TIFF get somewhere between 10 and 40,000 submissions for their, you know, for their programming. And you have no idea what their mandate is and who's going to screen the film. I have not gotten into festivals that I thought were, and they weren't big festivals. It's just like, I thought they were a cinch to get in. I don't mean they were easy. I just thought that my film was in the perfect lane to get into that film. And then you get some feedback and you're like, well, that's strange. I can't figure that one out. So you might get into TIFF. There's no harm in submitting it. It's, you know, $40, maybe $100 for some of them. But it's, don't have your heart set on being the Sundance darling.
And also the other thing is, if your film does not get into a festival, don't think it's your film, right? There are, like Jim said, there are so many submissions, and who knows why they pick someone's film or don't pick someone's film. And what I found with my films is that once you get into a couple, you gain traction. And then once you've gotten into a couple with your first film, your second film is more apt to be accepted by those festivals because they know you and they know your work. So don't take it personally. It doesn't mean that your film is crap. It just means that you didn't get into that festival. Common mistakes very quickly. I think that the main theme on this one is treat your people with respect, treat them kindly, give them props when props are due. That means on social media, that means on Instagram. Let them know that you appreciate them after they've left set, right? If you ever want to work with these people again, show them that you're appreciative.
I would say that the whole thing can be kind of summarized in, don't go into debt and don't lead with your ego.
Right.
If you lead with your ego, it doesn't do anybody any good.
So here's the big question. Where do I get the money? All of this leading up to, where do I get the money? And it's a question that never goes away, right? I'm on my 4th film now. I'm still asking myself, where do I get the money for this? So you can pay for it out of pocket. That's how I did my first 3 films. I paid for it out of my pocket. You can do crowdfunding. Be careful with crowdfunding, because you will only be able to ask people to donate, you know, maybe once every 5 years, because the people who are donating to the crowdfunding are probably your friends and your family. You can do a fundraiser. I did a fundraiser for Bracewater when I was when I first wrote it. Be careful with this as well, because you can end up spending more money on your fundraiser than you actually raise at your fundraiser, and that kind of defeats the purpose. So figure out who you can beg, borrow, and steal from to put on your fundraiser. Take your time. It's the same as prep for the production day. Prep for your fundraiser as well, to make sure that you're doing it as economically as you can. Bank, right? You can borrow from the bank. You can get a loan if your economic status, if your budgetary reality allows you to do that. I had a friend who put her house, remortgaged, refinanced her house so that she could make her first film. It worked out well for her, but only do that if your circumstances lend to that. You don't want to go into debt.
And that goes back to your why. You know, like you really have to know why you're doing it, because if you're gonna risk your own personal capital on something, and you have a good strategy to repay it, regardless of whether or not the film succeeds, it's still a big risk. It's a
risk, especially with short films. Government grants. Again, take your time filling out the grant, ask people for help, call the the people that are offering the grant, they usually have someone who can help walk you through it. Take your time. These are really competitive, and it's really difficult to get a grant. But I do think that this series of webinars later on, there is a webinar on grant writing. So perhaps that's something that you want to take advantage of. You can ask your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle,
Your kids.
To lend you the money or give you the money when they say what you want for Christmas or your birthday. Just say, I want cash because I want to go make a movie. Again, that's a finite pool, and you can't continually go back to that pool of money. So, have a plan. Then there's your credit cards. And we say no. It goes back to, don't put yourself in debt to make the movie. Figure out how you can do it cheaper, work an extra job to get a couple, more cash to do it. Just don't put yourself at risk, because the chance of it paying off and you making $100 million bazillion on your short film, it's so slim. So I don't actually think we have time to show the film examples. Maybe we did. Were the links on our resources page?
Yeah, they're at the bottom of the resource page. I think my trailer is about 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes.
So maybe I'll ask the moderators, do we have time to show these? They're both all said and told will be about 5 minutes. So I'm not sure if you have enough time for that, or did you want to move into questions?
Perhaps one film would be good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll show Jim's then.
Well, why don't we show Obdurate, since we both worked on? Are we going to show the trailer for Obdurate or the short?
Well, what do we have time for? The short is about 9 minutes. The trailer is about 1 minute. Let's
do the trailer, and then we can have. We have someone that says Shama wants to watch both. Let's do the trailer, and then we will have questions for everyone else. Hopefully we have time.
So let's do the Immigrant trailer. Both these trailers and the full length of the Immigrant is up online. If that's okay with you, Cynthia.
Yeah. I'm happy to show the Immigrant.
And the reason I want to show the Immigrant is because I shot this in LA. I was the cinematographer and one of the producers on the project. It was directed and produced by the Levy brothers, who are good, dear friends of mine. I've done a ton of projects with, and Scott Thompson, for those that are more in my age demographic and remember the Kids in the Hall, and then a couple of other names of note in there. But it was literally shot with DSLRs. We had a mini dolly that was about the size of a skateboard, and plywood that we were running it on inside Mike Sarah's house, who would just come off, like a $200 million movie. So okay. It's kind of an interesting way to look at a really bootstrapped project.
Excuse me, but which way to Hollywood? Ow!
Hello.
Hey, Michael, it's Bob London.
Hey, Bob, how you getting my number?
I'm back.
What, you here?
That whole immigration mess, you got that cleaned up?
Do you remember the last thing you said to me?
You took a dump on my kitchen floor and you didn't clean it up.
I might be a little bit fat, but I'm not bloated.
Boy's on a houseboat. It's been over for 15 years.
All right, best of luck, Bob. Canadian.
I need a job, and I need it fast.
So you just wait for the car to drive by, and when they open the window, you ask what kind of work they want done. Then you'll decide on the money, then you go with them, and of course, hope they are not a bad man.
It feels dirty.
It can be.
Speaking of work, I've got some if you're interested.
I got magic!
Welcome to America, Snowbag!
Please, oh, please! I need my wallet!
there we go.
So we obviously shot that film a little over a decade ago, but the full thing is available online. It's about a 20-minute film, and those links are also in the resources.
Yeah, so the Obdurate trailers in the resources, we're not releasing the Obdurate full film. We were hoping to be able to share it with you here, but because it's still doing the festival circuit, we can't really release it yet. So it'll be coming out soon. Keep your eye out for that. And so the final thoughts before we go into questions are have fun. Reach out to us if you want more information on anything, or if you have other questions that we didn't cover. And if you do make a film, send them, share them. We'd love to see them. And here is the link for our resources page. So when you go to that page, we have resources for all different aspects that we've covered here today, as well as links to both Jim's website and my website. And so if you have other questions, or you just want to, run something by us, like, just reach out. It's a community.
And another question from Cody. He asked, what is the Storytellers Conservatory?
So the Storytellers Conservatory is an organization run out of Los Angeles. It's run by one of my dear friends, Sean Sharma, who's a member of, he's in a leadership position at SAG-AFTRA, which is the American Actors Union. He is a top-level acting coach. He's a fine actor in his own right. He was also my neighbor when I lived in Venice. And they have weekly classes, but then we also produce these screenplays to build community. So it's a community that's probably about 3,000 people deep there now. It's been built over a long period of time. So I think it's storytellersconservatory.com, or if you just Google that, or send me an email and I can send you a link to it.
We can add it to the resources page.
Sure. Yep.
Another question from Claire. Where can we find crew members to work with? I don't have any friends who are into filmmaking.
My first thought, and Jim, you can expound on it, is to go to, on Facebook, oddly enough, there are a number of groups that you can join. And one of them is, I need to fix a crew, or I forget the exact.
I need a fixer producer. Yeah.
Yeah, I need a fixer producer.
Mm-hmm. I need a fixer producer. There's a Canadian edition to that. But I would say that you should really look at the filmmakers cooperatives. There's a bunch all over the country. I don't want to plug Toronto because we're in Mississauga, but LIFT is a good organization in liaison for independent filmmakers in Toronto. There's Charles Street Video. And they're all membership based. The memberships aren't expensive to join, and you can get discounted equipment from them and resources from them. And they run regular workshops, as well as build a community of aspiring filmmakers.
Well, and the other place really to go to are schools, film schools, because there are a number of people who are trying to build their resume, their demo reel, who are looking for projects to work on. They have the youth and the passion to do a number of projects. So go to, any of the film schools and just post something on their bulletin board, or, reach out to them. You'll be able to get, because we used students on both of my productions, and, a couple of the students were so great. We just keep asking them back now that they're professional.
Yeah. And I'll hire all those guys onto regular commercials as well. So it's a way for them to get their kind of feet wet and their street cred, and you can kind of test the waters with them. So Toronto Film School is one, Sheridan, Humber College, Ryerson, York. Those guys all have solid film programs.
It's also a really good way to start building your network, right?
That's very true. We have a question from David. I'm a composer who has scored a number of shorts and one feature. Could you please talk about the importance of the score and spotting sessions?
Jim, you can take that.
Sure. You know, the score of a film also gives it an incredible identity, and most of my films for the past few years have been in kind of they've all had kind of a different footprint for sound design. My last film had no score at all. It was just sound design. I did a movie with Chantal Kreviesic and Rain Maida that was about them. So they composed all the music for that film. But that collaboration is really critical. And I think as a filmmaker, it's sometimes hard to find the common language with the composer. So I think, I'm not sure I know exactly what the question is, but I think the best asset that a composer can have beyond, skill and taste that's simpatico with the filmmaker is to be able to communicate to somebody who doesn't have a language of music.
Or conversely, take me as when I sat with my first composer and talked to him about the tone of my film so that he could start getting his head around what kind of music I was going to be looking for. And I'm sitting there trying to hum something and like be able to talk Greek when I'm talking Russian. You know what I mean? Like it's two different languages. So it's really a collaborative experience. And then be really open to collaboration, as I said, because it is a two-way street. And as it was with the editor, maybe the person you give the score to is going to say, what about this? And you never thought of that. So I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
Shama asking, how do you suggest approaching mentors or directors to shadow for support in creating a film?
That's
that's a tough one because you get that asked a lot. I think it's really important to be legitimately interested in what they are doing. So if you are interested, then you will be interesting. So figure out what their wheelhouse is, but most importantly, figure out what you can offer them and what holes you can fill in their life or in their production. Because just coming in and observing on set is it can be invasive because it's you've got so many moving parts throughout the day. But I think a lot of directors, like mid-level directors, are open to at least talking through things. The top end ones are very, like the A-listers, the Ron Howards of the world are a little harder to access. Well, a lot harder to access, but the mid-level ones you can gain a lot of information from, but make yourself valuable to them.
Well, and I would also say, two comments is find films that are looking for like production assistance or something, and just be on set and start watching from afar, not necessarily start to build your social network so that when you have an interest in perhaps pursuing directing, you've helped out on a film with this person 5 times and they know who you are and they know that you're just not coming to them for that one thing. You've given them some social currency because you've been on set with them. And then the other thing would be to find student productions or go on to mandy.com and find films that are filming there, because helping out on those smaller sets will give you a more direct line to the director, and perhaps they'll let you shadow them just to learn from them.
Mm-hmm. Valentina asked, any guidance on how to shoot a short film during this pandemic?
Yeah, keep your script very small, contained to as few people as you possibly can. We do have strong guidelines in Ontario for COVID compliance. So that's worth investigating.
Go to,
So-
if you go to actratoronto.com, they have on their front page, they have the COVID compliance. And note that during this time, you do need a specific actual person dedicated 100% to be your COVID monitor on set. And there are specific, like the crew, everybody has to wear masks. The only people who can't be wearing masks are actors, and now actors are mandated to get tested. We did that for compliant, and I made sure that my actors were tested and negative, because the last thing you want is for someone to get sick. But there is a whole handbook now of regulations and rules that you need to follow. You know, again, with the background people, you don't want that background people, you don't want large crowd scenes. And you know, I'm happy to walk you through, because I've done now three sets with COVID, and I'm happy to share my knowledge. Flip me an email.
Thank you for everyone who joined us tonight for this webinar.